We are joined by an atheist, Christian, and spiritual thinker
to find an answer to the purpose crisis millions are facing today.
One of the reasons that I'm a Christian is because it's the best explanation for the way things are.
But if Christianity were true, we would not expect the kind of suffering.
So the first thing to understand is it is an internal feeling. We found in our study that if you your sense of purpose increases by 68%.
I asked my good friend Greg Koukl to come on my channel to talk about probably one of the biggest interviews he's done in a while on the Diary of a CEO YouTube channel with Steven Bartlett. Is that his name? Wait, hold on. Is that even his name? Yeah, Steven Bartlett. The topic of the interview itself was about meaning and purpose. It was more of a conversation than an interview, but it was actually about 5 hours of content, but the video itself ended up being about 3.5 hours. I asked Greg to talk about his reflections on the conversations, things that he has thought about in hindsight, points that he wanted to make, but maybe didn't get the opportunity to. Now, I watched the entire 3.5 hour interview and I was very impressed and also deeply intrigued. Alex O'Connor, for example, he's always really interesting to listen to, but I'd never really heard of Dr. K or Steven Bartlett. Dr. K, he's like the quirky, fun uncle who tells the best stories at the table, while Steven is like the wholesome, likable guy who's the best listener you've ever met and you wish was your brother. His stuff has come up more on my algorithm, and I've really enjoyed how he conducts his interviews and the conversations and the variety of guests that he's had on as well. I thought Greg did great, but I wanted to ask him some of my own personal questions about the interview and give him a chance to elaborate on a few things as well. So here is Greg Koukl. Greg, I am so happy to have you back on my channel. I always love it when we get to collab and chat together. In this case, yeah, we get to talk about your recent interview you had on Diary of a CEO, which
Right.
I had never really, I've heard of him before, of Steven, but I didn't realize what it was until you went on there. So I appreciate you coming on my channel, chatting with me.
Well, I feel the same way about chatting with you as you do about chatting with me. So it's always a fun time, whether like this online or privately together over dinner or whatever we're doing together at an event.
Yeah.
It's a thrill to be with you. Thanks so much. And this was a big event. This was, I hadn't heard about Steven Bartlett before. I was invited to be on the show. And then when I did a little, or actually Alex O'Connor, which really shows how out of touch that I am.
Yeah.
And so I had to do some catch up just to get clear on what I was up against. But that was quite an interview, 5 hours and 15 minutes of actual filming. 3 hours and 23 minutes made it in the final cut. So a lot left on the cutting room floor, but it was quite an experience for me.
Yeah, why don't you share that real quick? For those who haven't seen it, there's going to be clips interspersed within this interview.
Right.
What was left on the cutting room floor?
Well, in a situation like this, you always want to try to frame the issue strategically so it gives the audience a direction. They know where you're going with this issue, and the issue broadly was meaning and purpose. And is there meaning and purpose? And Steven was reading statistics about the UK, where he's from, and it's true here too. So many young people especially don't have any sense of meaning and purpose in their life. They're adrift, as it were, and that causes consternation, and I get it. And so the way I was trying to frame this was the fact that we're here together talking about the crisis of meaning and purpose is an indicator that meaning and purpose actually exist. There is a true meaning for us. That's why we hunger for it. If we weren't looking for it, then we wouldn't be hungering for it. And in fact, I mean, the 3 cats running around my house are not asking, gee, what's the purpose of my life and the meaning? What's it all about? You know?
And I never took you for a cat person, Greg. That's
well, they're my girls, my wife and 2 daughters, 3 cats, 3 females.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how that works in our household. But the point I'm making is this is a uniquely human enterprise. What's it all about? And the fact that we're asking the question is itself evidence, what I said, that there is an answer to find, or else we wouldn't be asking it. It's evidence of teleology, of purpose in life, that we're asking what the purpose is. We're the kinds of beings that know purpose or at least we suspect it exists. Now, C.S. Lewis made an argument for God from desire. You call it the argument of desire, that the desires we have satisfactions, at least in principle. So we are thirsty, and there is water to drink to satisfy the thirst. We are hungry, there is food that satisfies the hunger. We have a hunger, though, that is not physical. It's a soulish hunger regarding meaning, and that's not the only one. Justice is another one. And yet these things are fleeting, or it's not to be had on this earth, justice, so we must have been made for a different world, is what Lewis says. And my point is applying this particular question to our circumstance. And what I told Steven is, look, the reason they're feeling this way is because they are cut adrift. They are cut away from their natural mooring. And when I say natural, their appropriate human mooring, which is the God who made them. And now they're feeling at the mercy of every storm because they have no mooring. And you have two ways to go here with this. Either there is objective meaning and then purpose attached to it, or not. They're pretty straightforward. And if there is no objective meaning, if we are not made for something, then we aren't made for anything. And that purpose then becomes whatever we want to choose. It's totally subjective. But the key here is totally subjective, because the issue is many times people not feeling they know the purpose are going to suggest their own and build their own, you do you, but they always state it in the most noble terms. I want to be uniquely myself and do this noble-sounding thing. Well, it turns out if that's the way circumstances are, and there is no objective meaning, no God that gives our life meaning and therefore a purpose that follows from it, then any purposes we make up are going to be adequate, because there's no moral standard to distinguish a good purpose from a bad purpose. And that was my framing of the issue. All right. You have one of two choices. It turned out that, and I mentioned also Augustine's famous quote that fits in here so nicely, Melissa, and that is, Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. And of course, what we're talking about, as I pointed out in the opening, is the restless souls that we all are experiencing in the population is because they're cut off from God. That's an evidence that there is a God who made us for a purpose. And that's the drumbeat I wanted to continue through the entire discussion. Now, of course, I was able to revisit those issues, but apart from my kind of opening salvo that I just described, all of that was left out. There are other things I said at the beginning that were included. And just to be fair, when you got 5.25 hours of material and you got 3:23 in the final product, a lot's going to be left out for everybody. And I would say I think they did a pretty fair job of including material that I offered that was relevant and thoughtful, and I didn't feel I was done a disservice in the editing, let's put it that way. But I did miss those opening things because they're so critical. And when you do a thing like this, you want to frame your side so you can let the audience know, here's how I'm prosecuting this issue from the perspective of my worldview. And that was not there as crisply as I would have liked. And so other things were included, but I think the main thrust was left out. The citation from Augustine was left out, for example, and that's really at the heart of my point. We're hungry for God. That's what this shows.
Yeah, agreed. It's interesting because though that might have been left out to the mass audience, I feel like the real audience, in my opinion, was Steven Bartlett.
I agree with that, by the way.
There's something about him. I haven't watched a lot of his stuff, but he obviously got on my algorithm after I watched his interview with you.
Right.
And he says he's agnostic, but he seems like he's getting there. You know
Yeah.
what I
Well,
mean?
I think that he is truly agnostic.
I was trying to see how similar we are. That's really it, because we both sit in the same agnostic camp, but actually we're very, very different.
I think he's absolutely genuine. Alex O'Connor, who, and there was also Dr.K, who was kind of a mystical a clinical psychologist,
Yeah,
Harvard
he was
guy,
hard to
but
pin
also
down.
Buddhist, Hindu, it all
Yeah.
mixed in. So you got these three different worldviews exploring the notion of meaning and purpose. And Alex characterized himself as an atheist agnostic. Now, I don't take his claim to be an agnostic seriously, quite honestly. And I think many atheists will call themselves agnostic because they'll say, and Michael Shermer says this, well, I don't know there is no God, so I guess I'm agnostic. But agnostic and theist and not an atheist, these are belief categories. In other words, a person who's a theist believes in God even if he doesn't know for sure there is a God. An atheist believes there is no God even though he doesn't know for sure. And an agnostic has no belief either way because he's not sure. Okay? And so, but when they convert these things to knowledge categories, well, I don't know there is no God. My question is, what do you believe? Well, I believe there is none. Well, then you're an atheist. That's what atheists are. So Alex is kind of like, oh, I don't know, atheist agnostic. I think he is convinced there is no God, though in some sense I think he's open. But I wasn't impressed too much by his openness in the light of our discussion. Let's just
You
put it
said,
that way.
yeah, you mentioned he's a formidable foe. I agree. Alex O'Connor, he's probably one of my more favorite atheists. I enjoy watching Alex. I think that he's well spoken. He's polite. I think that he's a good example of civil dialogue. In one of your mentoring moments, you were mentioning that that whole discussion is a really good example of tactics, like the tactical approach, how to have the conversation. And so, the first half of the interview was about purpose and meaning. But what really caught my eye, and this is where I want to segue, is the second half of the interview. Speaking of Alex, because he mentioned some beliefs that I found quite surprising. Number one, I didn't know that he would have categorized himself as an agnostic. And secondly, the conversation around what he would have called, the Veda, panpsychism.
Right.
There's a view that I'm quite attracted to in the philosophy of mind called panpsychism, which literally means sort of like the view that consciousness is everywhere or in everything. It doesn't mean that everything is conscious. It doesn't mean this pen is conscious. What it means is that the stuff that the universe is made out of, so the fundamental matter of the universe, has at least mental properties, or might be mental properties. Because when you say, for example, we're in a world of like molecules in motion, right? I understand that sentiment. But if you ask a scientist, what is stuff actually made out of? Ultimately speaking, they will not be able to tell you.
Melissa, the irony is this is where I think I made the least contribution.
You did. You were very quiet.
I didn't have a lot to say. This was a discussion back and forth between Dr. K and Alex. And Alex is expressing his sense of mystery about consciousness. And this, I think, is a candid admission by him. I appreciated that even though he's an atheistic materialist and he wants to understand everything in light of Darwinian evolution, and you saw that impulse throughout, even the desire that we have for meaning, he cashed that out in terms of Darwinian evolution. Now, I don't think it works at all, and I explain my reasons why. But in any event, when he comes to consciousness, he's mystified. He doesn't know what to do with it.
Yes.
Now, the simplest way of understanding consciousness, that is, if you want to go with Occam's razor, okay, the least complicated way of understanding is the common sense solution. We are a immaterial self, soul, if you will, spirit, maybe, however you want to characterize it, that possesses a material body. And there's a deep, profound interaction when one can influence the other, but they are separate substances because there are different kinds of things that go on in each. My thoughts aren't in my brain. There was a comment about that during the discussion, this is going in my brain. Your thoughts aren't in your brain. Your beliefs aren't in your brain. Yeah. Beliefs have propositional content. There are no propositions in your brain. There's blood and cells and neurons and all kinds of physical stuff, but a thought or a proposition is not physical. It doesn't extend in space. It doesn't respond to the laws of physics and chemistry. And so it's completely different. Now, he acknowledges that. And he's trying to figure out where to put this mystery of consciousness in his whole worldview. And it's almost like he wants to extend his physicalism a little bit to include some kind of psychic element, panpsychism, which is almost like a Jungian mind of some sort over everything, which is completely consistent with the Hindu concept that was being advanced by Dr. K.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why Dr. K got so excited about it. Oh, you're going to be a Gnostic.
Now, I think if you take Alex's road, which I think is going to change real quick if it hasn't.
Why? Be honest.
I think he's going to go down the road of gnosis if he isn't already.
Gnosis. What is gnosis?
Knowledge.
Alex?
Gnosis is a Greek term. Gnosis means knowledge, but it's attached to, I guess, an ancient school of philosophy which believes that truth is obtained from looking inward.
Do you mean narcissism?
No, not narcissism. So I think if you want to, Alex, it's not a philosophy, it's a practice.
But what do you mean when you say, I mean, Stephen asked, you said, I'm going to go down
I think you got to walk down the Gnostic road, dude.
Would you tell us
what is that?
You didn't
It's
just say
practice,
that, you said you thought I was going to do that. What does it mean?
That I think you're going to do that? Or the path of
What
gnosis?
is the thing that you think I'm going to?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to start practicing Gnostic stuff.
And Dr. K says this, and then, of course, Alex has to define Gnosticism. And I'm not sure if this made it onto the clip or not, but when he did that, during our interview, he did a magnificent job. He characterized Gnosticism better than I could have, and he did the same with existentialism. This guy knows a lot. But I think he's genuinely mystified, but he is not willing to go it strikes me, the obvious route of mind-body dualism. There is a mind and there is a body. There are two things in human beings, not just meat all the way down, meat that thinks, whatever thinking amounts to, certainly includes neurologic activity, but it's got to be more than that. And so that's where he seems mystified. Now, I don't think he wants to go with the mind-body dualism because that's the Christian worldview. And it's perfectly characterized in Scripture. And to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, Paul says in Corinthians. So there's two. There's myself, who's an immaterial self, and that survives the death of my body. And then there's my body that I will be reunited with in the resurrection, so I'm a whole human being again at the end of all things. He didn't want to go that route. I have heard one explanation or one response that he's given. It's a standard objection to mind-body dualism, but to me it's shallow. He says, I don't know how the mind can interact with the body if mind-body dualism is true. How does an immaterial thing move a material thing? And my answer is, I don't know, but watch. Here it is. My immaterial self is moving my material self. And the great parallel to this, some might say, well, that's circular. I'm just saying, look, there's lots of things we don't understand how they work, but we know for other reasons that they work this way. My mind, top down, my psyche, if you will, controls my body. My body's not in control of my mind. If it were, then I could never be blamed for anything my body did wrong, and I could never be praised for anything someone thought my body did right. Okay, I couldn't receive, a royalty check from Zondervan for tactics because I didn't really write that. The molecules of my body just made that happen. I didn't choose those words. I didn't plan the structure. If I'm determined, if my mental activity is determined by my physical activity, but we know the opposite. Our common sense reflection shows us we're in charge of our bodies, which is why praise and blame makes sense. Now, here's an interesting little historical insight. When Newton began to really work on this gravity thing, there were a whole lot of scientists who resisted him. And the reason they resisted him is he was suggesting influence at a distance. influence at a distance. Now, that doesn't sound strange to us because we understand gravitational forces. The moon causes the tides and all that other stuff. But back then, all they knew was billiard ball kind of stuff. One thing hits another, and that there is that kind of influence, direct influence at a distance. How does that happen? Well, we don't know how that happens. Maybe we know more now than in Newton's time, but Newton was able to show that it did happen. And so this just goes to this broader point of mind-body dualism, that even though I don't know completely how the soul, the immaterial soul, moves a material thing like the body, nevertheless, I'm aware of doing that all the time. And I'm not the least bit tempted, nor should anybody else be, to doubt that that happens just because I can't quantify the nature of that relationship. But that's what bothers Alex O'Connor. He can't figure out how one moves the other. So he's going to go, to panpsychism? I just don't think that's the best option. But that was an interesting part of the conversation, in my view, principally because what Alex was doing, and again, very candidly, and I think with a lot of integrity, saying, I don't know, I haven't got this figured out yet. I can't reduce the mental, the soulish consciousness to something physical. This can't be done. And of course, the new atheists have been struggling for a long time to do it. I have on my bookshelf right back there, Thomas Nagel's Mind and Cosmos. I don't know if you've read it or not, but the subtitle, I'm just going by memory, but it's something like, Why the Neo-Darwinian Materialistic View of the Universe is Almost Certainly False. Now, Thomas Nagel is an atheist, and he took a lot of heat for this, but the reason he wrote this book is because you can't reduce consciousness to something physical, and it's one of the most salient features of the world. So I respect the struggle that Alex is going through, and I hope it leads him into more productive areas than he's in, panpsychism. But I'm telling you, Dr. K got all lit up when he heard that. He's really excited. You're going to join us, our panpsychic thing, from Hinduist perspective, consciousness is the fundamental reality of the universe. It is the only thing that's real, ultimately. All the rest is Maya. It's an illusion. And the idea is we're part of that illusion. We have to get back to the Godhead and, be lost in the in the one true thing, the God of the immaterial realm. And so anyway, so that is an explanation for why Dr. K was so excited about this part of the conversation. But it was hard for me to get in, as it was in a number of places when you have this kind of discussion going on, and they're having it back and forth themselves, and I'm taking some notes. I think, well, I got to get to this later if I can ever get in. But I didn't want to be rude and just burst in and, wait a minute, hold your horses kind of thing. So I just let that particular part of the conversation play out.
Yeah, speaking of Dr. K, very interesting character. Alex O'Connor is very consistent in a lot of things. And in one area, I've seen him debate multiple times in different subjects, but one area that he is very consistent in is morality. And he's very honest and intellectually honest when he has these conversations. And I almost spit out my coffee at the one point in the interview where Dr. K is talking about evil and suffering.
Right.
This was another topic that came up. And morality and all these things. And Dr. K is, asking Alex about, the kid who died of cancer and why the kid died. And Alex is like,
First question that I have for you is, when I say the word karma, what does that mean to you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what you mean. You mean by that.
So I think the first thing to understand about karma is it's just the principle of cause and effect.
Yeah.
So when a child dies of cancer, what would you say is the cause of their death?
Well, I don't know about the science of cancer very much, but I would suppose it's the cancer.
But what I found very jarring, I guess is the word, is Dr. K his perspective of evil and suffering, and he kept talking about karma. And the way that he explained it is possibly one of the best ways I've ever heard it explained. I highly
Interesting.
disagree with it,
Yeah.
but I appreciated the way that he explained it.
Karma. So going back to your question about, if a child with cancer dies at the age of 1, is their purpose fulfilled? Arguably, yes, because that could have been their purpose in this life, right? So their purpose could have been, so there's a really interesting story about, many years ago, there were a group of angels, I'm just going to use the Western terminology, devas, who disturbed Shiva in his meditation. And so he cursed them and he said, the curse that you guys are going to do is y'all are going to be born on the earth for one lifetime of a human. And then the devas were like, oh my God, like this is terrible. Like we're going to be cursed to be born on the earth, and the earth is full of suffering and Sisyphus, and there's no meaning with a capital M. So then they go to Shiva's daughter and they ask her, hey, can you help us out? Like, can you please go talk to your dad? Can you please get him to change his sentence? And she says that Shiva's never going to change his sentence. That's impossible to do. He's also kind of this embodiment of karma and things like that. So he says, but I can help y'all out. What I can do is I'm going to be born with y'all. And then there's this other story in the Mahabharata where basically she has 7 children and then she drowns them the day after they're born. And so she says, the technical situation is you're going to be born for one lifetime. I can make a lifetime happen in a moment. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's moral. I don't know if it's mythology.
But a potential explanation for why children get cancer.
It's a potential explanation for why children get cancer.
I don't think that Alex was impressed or convinced by that. But will you tell us a little bit about what was going through your mind during that time and how you would have answered what Dr. K was saying?
Well, I challenged Dr. K at this point because the way he was explaining karma was as simple cause and effect. That's all it is, cause and effect, okay? And he even made some appeal to physics, every action gets an equal and opposite reaction. Of course, there was no relationship to the laws of physics and karma, because the laws of physics don't at all. He wasn't using that as an illustration or a parallel concept to help us understand it. It seemed to me, he thought they were connected. So he's giving a little bit of kind of physics legitimacy to the concept of karma. I thought that was cheating, okay? But he was using moral language. He was talking about obligation and duty. And I don't have my notes in front of him, but I know that duty was one of them and obligation. Now, obligation is the core of morality. Morality just is obligation. You are obliged to do this and not that. Now, that seems to require an obliger, like a god, who is doing the obliging, but there is nothing like that in his system. And so I pressed him on this, and he goes, no, just cause and effect. I said, but wait a minute, you use these words to describe karma. And my understanding is that that's exactly the way karma works. It works in a moralistic way. In other words, you do a bad thing and bad things happen to you, and you do a good thing and good things happen to you. You don't do a bad thing and good things happen to you. So it's not just cause and effect. It's cause and effect along moral lines. Now, he can deny that all he wants, but that's what ends up being cashed out in discussion. And that's where I think it was a significant problem. And I did press him on this point. There's another point that I wish had been a little bit more aggressive on that relates to this. And that is that I wanted to ask him at one point, and I don't know if this made the final cut, but he said, do not even ask yourself questions about right or wrong or good or evil. I don't know if you remember that, but he said it. And I was surprised in one sense, given the reality of the problem of evil and the reality of good and evil. And, we deal with these concepts all the time, but he has to deny them, because if the only reality is one, a unity, that's classic monism, okay, yeah. Hinduism, I guess Vedantic Hinduism, then there can't ultimately be a distinction between good and evil. He is in the same boat that Alex is in. Alex acknowledges this as a moral non-realist. In fact, it's worse for in fact, it's worse for Alex because he's an emotivist. He says, when you make moral statements, you're just expressing emotion. You're not even saying anything meaningful when you say rape is wrong. It's not even true or false. It's just a kind of thing. So, and I think that's, anyway, I have another, we can talk about that in a moment if you will. But in Dr. K's case, the foundation of his worldview entails that all of these individual things are illusions. So even the difference between good and evil is an illusion. And there were times when he intimated that, and even times when he's, like I said, he said, don't even talk about good or evil. It's not the right question. So I wish I would have asked him point blank, what is the ultimate difference, Dr. K, on your view, and according to your way of looking at reality, what is the ultimate difference between evil and good, if any? See what he had to say.
Yeah.
I know what his worldview dictates, no difference. And at least Alex, at some point, as you pointed out, was willing to be consistent about that. But he wasn't entirely consistent because though he gives way regarding the problem of evil, he makes no moral claims, he is concerned about suffering. Now, if he's a moral non-realist and he's concerned about suffering as if suffering, animal or human, is a problem, my question is going to be, what is the problem? I think he was smuggling in moral qualities to suffering, and he was playing on that notion by continuing to bring that issue up. He kept coming back to it with me, bang, 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 bang across the table.
Yeah.
And I said, look, you're smuggling morality in. No, I'm not. Okay, well then what's the problem with suffering? You know, I didn't mention this, but I thought of it afterwards. I said, what about all the tomatoes? What tomatoes? All of those millions and billions of tomatoes that have been fallen from the vine and rotted on the ground. Isn't that a problem for you? No. Why not? Well, they're not suffering. Why is suffering a problem then if it's just as naturalistic in its explanation as rotting tomatoes? It's because in his mind, there must be something morally questionable about suffering, which casts aspersions on the Christian worldview. That's his point. He's trying to cast aspersions on my view. The irony is, he doesn't believe there's any moral consequence, or he says, to suffering of animals or human beings, which includes that mother whose daughter was dying of cancer. So in a certain sense, his view is much more unattractive than mine, where I could give an explanation of why the world is broken, which everybody knows. And his view, the world's not broken. And I wish I had taken more time to press that issue with him, since he was pressing the suffering issue so strongly with me.
He really was, and it's interesting with Dr. K. Where Alex seemed very, very consistent, as did you. Of course, I'm more familiar with your beliefs. Dr. K kind of seemed to have his hand in all the spiritual cookie jars.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he prayed to Christ.
I feel way more confident in what you're saying is because
Christ is pulling at your
100%. Yeah. So I think Christ, we both talk to Christ, so like we're good on that. Like I know where he's coming from.
I believe he said that he in Hinduism, which I didn't realize that's what he was until over halfway through. I'm like, what is this guy? He's spiritual, he's squishy, but what is he? Oh, okay, Hinduism. And one thing that he said is atheist, agnostic, Christian, we're all basically, everybody's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Polytheist, theism, whatever it is. And I thought that was kind of convenient.
I was an atheist. I think I'm still an atheist. I think there are a couple of other things that are a little bit unusual. So like people think, like in the West, we think that atheism, polytheism, and monotheism are contradictions. We don't really think that in Hinduism. Like those things can coexist.
Mm.
And in the sense, there was one time at one point in the interview, he was talking about spiritual sensitivity. Yeah. He said that he qualified this, though. Maybe he's saying, maybe I'm just a good psychiatrist, but it was almost like a prophetic, like dip and run, right?
Yeah,
where it's like, hey, I got some spiritual insight. I make like NAR prophets, right? They make a vague claim and then leave the room, whether they're wrong or not. But essentially, he's implying that he has a special spiritual insight that y'all don't have.
Something weird happens, which is when I sit with people, I have intuitions about them. Now, is this real? Is this fake? Is it delusional? I don't know. You could argue that I'm just a really good psychiatrist with really good cold reading. So if you want to know the real answer, like, I'm not a great psychiatrist. People think I'm so brilliant as I'm not. I'm cheating. I'm using a layer of information that I don't think most people have access to, which I know is a completely undefensible claim, except if you do Agna Chakra practices too, you will see what I'm talking about.
You missed a strange part. It wasn't entirely on the final cut, but he actually made a big fuss about me being kind of an enlightened person.
Yeah,
He
you
said,
mentioned that.
Kokol has got it. He's got it. And he said, just look at his smile. Look at the way he smiles. You know he has it. I mean, this was so silly to me. I didn't disparage it. Obviously, he's saying something nice about me, but it was so I must have had a kind of enlightenment too. And at one point I had to say, look, we have completely different worldviews, just for the record.
Yeah.
And this is an insight, though, to Hinduism, I think, that a lot of people don't have. Keep in mind, and you know that just from your own background, Eastern religion, particularly Hinduism, holds that the only reality is a unity. Monism is what it's called, one-ism. It's the only thing that exists in the God consciousness kind of thing. And we're all lost because we think we're separate from him and we're not. And when we realize that we are God, then it's like the drop that gets dropped into the ocean and it disperses into the ocean, and that's nirvana, right? It's an oversimplification, I realize, but it's something like that. But it explains why Dr. K can say all these religions are pretty cool, pretty good, no worry. It's because the thing that gets you to consciousness, God consciousness, cosmic consciousness, is a practice, a spiritual practice called an asana, okay? And their yoga is an asana, meditation is an asana. But it turns out what other religions do in their private religious, parochial religious practices, whatever they are, those turn out to be asanas too. So you can do all the Christian stuff, and without realizing it, you're on your way to Hindu cosmic consciousness. In other words, it's not that all the religions are equally true. It's that Hinduism is true. The other religions, when taken at face value, are making mistakes. There isn't a personal God like the Hindus, like the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews think. God is just all-encompassing, all in everything, all in all, kind of a pantheistic whatever. And yet, even if you practice these other things mistakenly in your own doctrine, you are still progressing towards the enlightenment that Hinduism will ultimately give you. So essentially, he's saying, and this is why I wish I could have been more clear. So he didn't say this directly, but I've drawn this conclusion from other studying Hinduism and seeing people talk like this that are of that persuasion. It's not that each religion is equally legitimate in itself, because obviously their views contradict. Christians, Muslims, Jews believe in a personal God. That's not the God of the Vedas, right? All this is an illusion, where for us, it's not. It's concrete reality. So they can't all be correct on that level. But what really is going on is all these religions will ultimately lead to Hinduism, which is the true, accurate story of reality, if I could put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he says they're all okay, but that's misleading. And I wish they would just say it straight out, but they usually don't.
Yeah, no playing footsie cakes, just say it directly. And that's why I appreciated the way the conversation went and the way that he talked about karma in particular. I think the reason why it was a little refreshing is that he was so honest. I mean, he's talking about pretty terrible things happening to people. And in his perspective, at least the way that I took it was, oh, well, that the mom who killed her children are actually doing her a favor, or doing her children a favor, because now that they can, they worked off that karma and now they can be born again. And in
really
another
quickly.
life.
She kills them as infants. That's what he said. She kills them all as infants, and then they get that taken care of. They don't have to live a life of misery to work off that karmic debt. Yeah, that's right. That was pretty shocking.
Yes. And he just said it straight out. And I mean, I think he realized how that sounded.
I realized that I offered a terrible example.
And there was all kinds of issues that came up with that. Do you have any residual thoughts
So,
about
yeah,
talking?
I think he was quick to say, I'm not sure if this is the way it works out, but this might be a way of explaining.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's moral. I don't know if it's mythology.
Alex picked up on that. So you're just suggesting a possible way that you might characterize how evil works and why this kind of suffering happens in the world. And he didn't take exception with that. It troubled me a little bit because he was willing to beat up on me.
Yes.
And that act of disobedience created a big mess.
What that means is that the fool does not explain the proclivity to sin because Eve already had it. It does not explain the existence of evil because knowledge of that already existed before she committed the fall. It also doesn't explain the origin of suffering because, of course, Eve's punishment for eating from the tree of the knowledge
Well,
of
you're
good and
talking
evil.
about suffering prior to human beings in animals. Okay,
I'm talking about
granted.
suffering in human
It
beings.
does.
Before I'm told that in the face of such existential tragedy, I turn to religion to give us a sort of sense of fulfillment and a sense of explanation. But when asked about the mechanism of how, I'm told it's because at some undisclosed number of years ago, somebody committed a sin against God, and that's why your child has now died of cancer.
Which I'm not objecting to. This is the way these things work. But because of my characterization that the world is broken because God made man as his image to be in friendship with him, and then human beings rebelled at the garden, and that's what broke the world, and all the subsequent ugliness that followed, which that was where Alex really pressed me on that. So he obviously wasn't satisfied with my solution. Why is he then not saying a word to
Yes.
Dr. K about that? I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask. Maybe he was worn out at that point with talking about that issue. I don't know. But here's the thing that I wanted to I tried to do a couple of times, and I don't know if I completely succeeded. Let's draw back to 30,000 feet. Let's look at these competing worldviews, okay? Here we have Alex that can't even tell somebody who says, my life lacks meaning and purpose, and this was what Steven had asked him about. He has nothing to say. Oh, go to church, take drugs, read a book on philosophy.
Whatever.
It's like whatever turns you on. Exactly. Marx's opiate of the people, religion as the opiate. Whatever drug makes you feel better, because there's no answer. And he has no answer but a naturalistic answer to the problem, the problem of evil and suffering in the world. So he's got nothing comforting to offer anyone on anything. The reason is that he's an atheist. An atheist, pardon me, is the nothing religion. I'm not being condescending. I'm trying to be accurately descriptive. It has nothing to offer, and even at one point, Alex is shrugging his shoulders like, why are you asking me this question? I'm an atheist kind of thing. And then when you go to Dr. K, you have it's more fanciful, it's less raw and to the point, but it still amounts to the same thing. There is no ultimate distinction between good and evil. I have no solution for a suffering person. Maybe, if your mom would have drowned you when you were younger, you'd work off all this bad karma or whatever. I don't know. But what I'm going to try to help you do clinically is just do something in your life to make you feel better. That's all. A very utilitarian approach.
So we're talking about subjective, right? What you find is that they have three things. The first is that they have some degree of self-direction. So this is like, I choose to do something. They're not just taking it from life. They are making choices. This is where people also get confused because they think like, which choice is right? That kind of thinking is actually irrelevant. There isn't a right choice or a wrong choice. What correlates with your sense of direction is whether you make it or not. So you actually need to get away from the concept of right and wrong.
And so here, what do Christians offer? And by the way, what Dr. K offered was rather complex, as you recall. There was all kinds of complexity, not just clinically, but also spiritually. Do the Kundalini deal, sit just so with your heel just so. Remember that one? And the third eye and all this other stuff. And it was Amy Hall from Stand to Reason who made the observation, Christianity is so simple. By comparison.
Yeah.
And I don't mean simplistic. I mean, it's just so straightforward, okay? So with regards to the problem of evil, that we were struggling with in one way or another. All of us were trying to give their perspectives and their answers regarding that particular problem. Neither have answers. What do we say? The world hasn't always been like this. God made us with meaning for purposes that are meaningful for our flourishing. We rebelled against God. That broke the world, and this is why the world's broken. And God is in the process of rescuing the world, redeeming the world, making the world a place, making us better in this broken world, and then also seeking to make the world, well, in the long run, will be making the world much better when he restores all things. So, but we who are participants in the evil can be forgiven and restored in relationship with God to experience the meaning we were made for, that we've been hungering for, and live a life according to his principles so that we flourish in the midst of a world that's broken. And one of the things that I said early on is look at people can flourish even if they don't know God, if they still live according to his principles, because he made the world a certain way for humans to flourish. And if we live according to those principles, we are going to flourish, but we won't experience the ultimate flourishing, which is to be in friendship with him. And that's what makes sense of everything. Now, I don't know. Well, I'll tell you my conviction, obviously, ours is that story of reality makes the most sense of everything. And it isn't highfalutin complex, even a kid could understand it. Mm-hmm. And enter in to God's solution for meaning and purpose. What they offered was nothing, really. They didn't offer anything substantive. They offered a lot of chatter. But in terms of, and again, I don't mean to be disparaging of them. I'm trying to be descriptive of the content. Mm-hmm. A lot of chatter, a lot of complexity, but what it comes down to is just, this is, back to Karl Marx again, the founder of communism. Mm-hmm. Religion is the opiate of the people. Take the drug that makes you feel better, because that's all you have. And that was Alex's answer, and in some ways, that's also Dr. K's answer.
Would you categorize yourself as being lost and directionless?
To some degree, of course, yeah. To some degree, everybody is. Well, there are different questions here, right? Like, am I happy right now? Sure. Like tomorrow,
are you
maybe
content
not.
in your life?
Across life?
If you had to rate your contentment in life out of 10, I'll do the same.
It's not a very easy thing to quantify. But on meaning and purpose, you're unlikely to find the best advice from someone who's never gotten out of that armchair. And even the person who has and claims to have experienced it for themselves and knows what the truth is, I think anybody who says to you with a straight face, I know what the meaning in life is either lying or will instantly tell you that they're not going to be able to convey that information, at least not very easily.
Yeah, I completely picked up on Alex picking on you. And Dr. K had a lot. I mean, if the tables were turned, there was a lot that Alex could have been like, what did you just say? But he didn't even go there. There was all these lines thrown out, and he didn't grab at any of them with
Except
Dr.
for mine.
K. But he honed in on you. And the one thing he honed in on you, I actually wanted to give you a little bit more space to talk about this, because I found myself a little... I'm like, oh man, let him talk. That's how I felt, was let Greg, hash this out a little bit more. But one thing that Alex kept bringing up and picking on you for, if you will, was suffering, the problem of evil, arguing that if Christianity were true, he wouldn't see this level of suffering. You've mentioned this before, especially since there's animal suffering. And the one thing he brought up was, well, first, I think he misunderstands human nature. But the one thing he focused on was Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
This one act, you mean to tell me this one act caused all this suffering, but he avoided, I noticed, the moral language altogether.
Yeah.
He was very consistent.
Yeah.
And personally, I've always had the most questions as a Christian. I say this as a believer.
Sure, of course.
The first 3 chapters of Genesis, I scratch my head at. I think that there's more to know there. And so he's taking one of these questions that even Christians ask, and he's just pinning you down on this.
If the fall is the explanation for, shall we say, the moral evils that people commit, like the Holocaust, the reason why people have a proclivity to commit the Holocaust is because of the betrayal of God's trust, few million years ago, whenever it was you think it was, if Adam and Eve's transgression is the explanation for why humans have a sinful nature and act upon sin, then why did Eve act upon the sin before the fall had happened? Eve must have had a proclivity to sin in order to betray God in the first place. And so I don't think it suffices to say that the explanation for why we have human beings with a proclivity to sin, like Adolf Hitler, is because of the fall, if the fall is a result of a proclivity to sin from Eve. Do you think she did something immoral?
Yeah, she disobeyed God.
And what did she eat from? The tree of the...
I'm not sure.
She ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Right. So she ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, implying that before she ate of it, she didn't have a knowledge of good and evil. Well, how can she have done something immoral before she
Alex,
ate it?
Can I ask you a question?
Hold on.
No, this goes to a
contradiction
in my view.
What would you add to that part of the interview?
Yeah, I've actually thought about this a lot, as I have a lot of pieces of the interview, that and how to respond. And the question is, the Christian answer very, very broadly is that people's actions have consequences in the lives of people who do not participate in those actions. Now, he characterized this in the most uncharitable way imaginable. Are you telling me that you're going to comfort this woman whose child is dying of cancer by telling them that thousands of years ago 2 people ate a fruit?
But he won't pick on Dr. K.
Yeah, he wouldn't pick on Dr. K. But and he's studied philosophy and theology, at Cambridge or Oxford, one of the two, and he knows better. But he makes this look so terrible. Now, here's what I would say, and this is what I'll offer you and all the rest of the listeners that are thinking about this. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Within a few days, 1 or 2, the United States declared war on Japan. And immediately, Adolf Hitler did one of the most stupidest things in his life, and he declared war on the United States, an industrial giant across the pond that he could not touch. And in 4 years, the United States of America, with the RAF, the Royal Air Force, had reduced Germany to rubble. There were no cities left to bomb. Why? All because one man made one decision that resulted in the deaths of millions and millions of his own people that had no part in that decision at all. The fact is, people make decisions that have ramifications on other people's lives that have nothing to do, that had nothing to do directly with that decision. And we know this concept all the time. It's a cause and effect kind of relationship. Now, I think there are questions about the fall that are worth exploring, but this particular one is pretty straightforward. Are you telling me that one person wrote something on a piece of paper and that caused the death of millions and millions of people in his own country? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And now we know the details, and of course we see how that happens. What we have a harder time doing is thinking about the consequence of the fall on all of humanity, the fall of Genesis 3. But that's just simply because we are removed in time and detail from that. When the Second World War was reasonably recent, we can watch movies and documentaries about it, and we know the numbers, 60 million dead in the whole war. And by the way, that was also his fault because he decided to not only annex Austria and later take Czechoslovakia without firing a shot, but then he attacked Poland on September 1st, 1939. That started the Second World War. By the time the dust had settled, 60 million people were dead. Why? Because of the choices of Adolf Hitler and also the Japanese Empire. Okay? Individuals making choices that resulted in all of this. That's the way it works. There's nothing strange about that. Evil, yes, which you ought to have a category for in your worldview if you're going to find fault with that. But Alex has no category for that in his worldview. And again, I'm suspicious of his complaint even about suffering because I still think he's smuggling in a moral quality to that, or else why would anybody care? Lots of people like the suffering of others. ones that they're inflicting on others. They enjoy that. That's a moral harm, and that's why he brings it up.
Yeah, and then you have the issue of his disbelief in the soul.
Yeah.
Because if you're talking about a spiritual sin, then you're talking about a spiritual DNA, right? I mean, you're talking about something that's being spread to humanity.
It's going to be very difficult. If you're just thinking cause and effect physically, you don't have any problem there, but it's going to be very difficult to talk about moral culpability, which is entailed, by the way, in our understanding of the fall, without believing in morals and culpability, blame.
Yeah.
But now he wants to reject that. Okay, fair enough. He wants to make it all emotions. Then I'm just going to say you're troubled by suffering, right, Alex? Yes. I'm sorry you're having such a bad hair day. Take a few pills, read some philosophy, go to church, ingest some mushrooms. You'll feel better tomorrow about the suffering.
That's his own advice.
That's it. That's his own advice.
Yeah.
Right. And that's consistent with his worldview. I
Mm-hmm.
have a worldview that allows me to take umbrage with suffering and realize this is a concern. Now, the way I explained animal suffering is whenever you design something, there's also always going to be a trade-off. So you can design a glass to drink out of, but if you drop it and it breaks, you could cut your foot. So I thought of this great illustration, and I forgot, I didn't use it then, but I could have used it, especially since two members of the conversation were from the UK.
Yeah.
And the illustration was that, I don't know if you've ever been to London, Melissa. Have you ever been to London? Okay, you
No.
haven't taken the tube or the underground. Okay, but everybody who has knows the answer to this question. You go into the underground, and there's a curb there as you're waiting for the train, and on the curb is a sign. Painted on the curb right there by your feet is a sign. What does the sign say?
The gap.
Mind the gap. How do you see? You even know it? You
No
haven't
way,
been
I
there.
know that.
So the sign says, mind the gap, all right? The gap is the space between the platform and the train where it travels, and the mind is the British way of saying, be careful, pay attention, all right? And why is that there? It's because of the design of the underground. You have to have space between the platform and the underground subway in the tube in order for it to operate properly. In order for it to operate properly, there is a design trade-off. There's a danger, and so you have to be careful of the danger. And this is true about everything. Now, back to our thing about animal suffering. Why do animals suffer at all? Because they have the ability to experience pain. Got it. All right. Where did that come from? Well, it's a protective feature. You put your hand on a hot stove, you recoil because it hurts. There are all kinds of things that you do that all of a sudden the pain is signaling you stay away. However, it has a downside. Most of the time it works fine. But when it works when you can't get away from the source of the pain, like when you're being eaten, well, that's no fun. Or being burned in a fire or whatever, well, then pain still is pain. That's the downside. Mind the gap. My point here is we have actually a very sophisticated physiological feature, which is pain, which we experience in lots of different ways. There's physical pain. You have an upset stomach. That feels one way. You bang your shin. That feels different. A headache is different. A heartache, different. That's an emotional level. That's a whole nother thing. But we have these things that are warning signs. I think that because of the complexity of these things physiologically, clearly they're designed for a purpose, yet at the same time, they have a downside. There's a trade-off. And more could be said about this. I'm not saying that the trade-off concept is a knockdown, drag out, everybody's going to be satisfied about this. But I think this is a fair answer, at least as a partial answer. God designed pain for a good thing, just like the subway with the space is designed for a good thing, but mind the gap. Don't fall in.
Yeah.
And that's part of the answer. Trade-off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this segues into probably the last question I'll ask you because we talked about it a little bit before,
Okay.
where Steven is wrapping things up. And basically, he's asking about how to remove the feeling of being lost and how to find meaning in life, right?
Mhm.
This the meta question, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
I found Alex's answer to be quite bleak,
yeah.
quite depressing.
If anybody thinks that the four of us sat at this table are going to solve the meaning crisis and give people a 5-step guide to finding meaning in their life, and that will be the sort of case closed, then they're delusional.
You gave your answer, but I am wondering if there's anything you would add to Steven's question.
Well, I actually had two last words, as it turned out, because he was going around the circle, and then he asked me this question that seemed like a summary question, like he's winding down, which he
Mm.
was. And I offered some more thoroughgoing thoughts. And I honestly, at this point, can't remember what I said, but I think I was trying to sum up my case. All right. And then he said, last word from you, Alex, last word from you, Dr. K, then Greg, last word from you. And now I get
Mhm.
another shot. So I did something entirely different. And I don't know that I would do anything other than what I did. And what I did was, as I said, here's my encouragement for people that are not sure and are maybe their curiosity is piqued a little bit by some of the things I said, by the Christian understanding of reality and how it touches on all of these issues that we've talked about. They can do something that I did and many people have done. You can ask God to show you if it's true. Now, I think this actually has a name, Melissa. I think this is called the skeptic's prayer. But I remember for me in the summer of 1973, I was my last year in the Army, and I went out in the field in Fort Lewis, Washington, and I said, and I felt a little silly at the time, but I just said, God, if you're real, and Jesus is who my brother says he is, who's been witnessing to me, then I want to know. Show me.
Yeah.
And that was it. And there wasn't any coconuts falling from the tree, no thunder, no voices, nothing. It was just a simple prayer. But right after that, things really began to take off for me in terms of God working in my life and bringing understanding to me. And I have heard that many other people have prayed that same prayer,
Mhm.
such that it's got a moniker to it, the skeptic's prayer. And I just encourage people to do that. Now, I don't know if people took the advice or not, but there's been close to 2 million views since that day it was released. Now, that doesn't mean 2 million people made it to the very end where I offer this advice, but nevertheless, this is what I offered, and I think it's still good advice. Sometimes you get the apologetics out there, all the reasons and the facts, and then you have to maybe it's good to go for the existential. Just ask God from your heart, are you there? Show me yourself. And sometimes atheists will say this kind of mockingly, okay, where is he? Why doesn't he just come
Mhm.
up and whatever? Well, that's not going to work because he's not a butler. But if you ask from your heart, God, show yourself to me. I want to know one way or another. I'm open genuinely.
Mhm.
Then I do know that God answers that prayer for lots of people because I've heard people say that, and it happened with me as well. So I think the note I ended on, I was very satisfied with, and I was glad to have a second shot. I got my summary, my overview, and then I was able to add this one particular piece.
Yeah, and that's biblical too. Those who seek him will find him. And I think that
Knock,
there's yeah.
ask,
Mhm.
ask, knocks. Ask, seek, knock. Knock.
Yeah.
What is the order there? They're in increasing
That
levels of intensity. Ask,
yeah.
seek, knock. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. There it is.
exactly.
Sermon on the
And
Mount.
I second that. I remember one of the best testimonies I've ever heard was a Jehovah's Witness who was questioning. And it was when he stumbled upon Thomas in John. Yeah, it's in John.
John 20.
Doubting Thomas. Yeah, my Lord and my God. And they've gone over that verse thousands of times, right? And they always have their excuse. But there was something about it. He's praying to Jesus. He's like, I can pray to Jesus. And then he looked kind of like up and he said, God, I don't know who you are or what you are, but I really want to know if
Mm,
if this is true.
wow.
And he's just one of the most on fire Christians today. But
Yeah.
I loved hearing that. And there's a fervent heart there, right?
Yeah,
A
that's right.
postured heart of I want to know actually what's true. And I think that's kind of what you are saying. And I do have
Exactly.
one last simple question. I know this was supposed to be the last one, but if say Steven watches this, I mean, he probably won't. But if you could have one thing that you could tell him and leave him with after that conversation, what would you say?
I would say, Stephen, I'm really glad that I had a chance to chat with you about these things, and I think you are genuinely trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I hope what you do is you think about the options that were offered, not in a utilitarian way, what will make you feel better now, but what comports with your deepest what worldview comports with your deepest intuitions about the nature of the world. And I think if you do that, there's not going to be any contest at all as to which one is the most sound. And when you start seeking God, the God of the Bible, the pieces will start falling into place, just like they did for your friend from Dubai, who he talked about.
Oh,
Life
yeah.
totally transformed when he became a Christian. That's what
Yeah.
I'd say.
Beautiful.
And I'd also say I'd love to talk with you again in more detail.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
it.
Here's my official request. Let's do a one-on-one with Greg and Steven. Let's make it happen. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. I was really looking forward to this interview. Guys, be sure to check out the description for more information. And Greg, thank you again so much for coming on.
Let me add this. By the way, we offered a free copy, I should say a free chapter from The Story of Reality to the DOAC listeners, and your people can go to that landing page to get it. Okay, so here it is. It's str.org. That's the Stand to Reason website, str.org/DOAC.
Okay.
DOAC, DOAC, Diary of a CEO. And you can hitchhike on that landing page and get the chapter of The Story of Reality.
That will be in the description as well, guys. So yeah, thanks for that, Greg. I appreciate it.
It's great. Melissa, always fun to be with you.